Imagine sitting in a practice room at an opera house, holding sheet music for a Russian aria you need to perform in 3 months. You've studied languages the traditional way your entire life, textbooks, grammar drills, vocabulary lists, and you can barely order coffee in Spanish after 4 years of high school classes. Now you need to master Russian well enough to sing an entire opera and make audiences believe every word. That's when panic hits. This was the exact moment an opera singer named Gabriel discovered something that changed everything about how humans actually learn languages. He wasn't a linguist, he wasn't a professor, he was just someone who desperately needed a solution because his career depended on it. What he figured out in that moment of desperation became a method so powerful that he eventually learned 6 languages fluently: Russian, Italian, French, German, Hungarian, and Korean. Not in decades, but in years, some in just months. The discovery? Your brain has been fighting you this entire time. Every method you've been taught, translating word by word, memorizing vocabulary lists, studying grammar rules for hours, goes against how memory actually works. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You pour information in, it immediately drains out, and you wonder why you can't remember anything. If you've ever felt stupid trying to learn a language, if you've ever studied for months and still couldn't have a basic conversation, if you've ever wondered why a 5-year-old can speak fluently but you can't after years of classes, what you're about to discover will completely rewire how you think about language learning. This isn't about working harder, it's about working with your brain instead of against it. Because here's the truth that changes everything. You're not bad at languages. You've just been taught using methods that guarantee failure. Your brain is actually a language learning machine, but it's been handcuffed by translation, crippled by boring drills, and starved of the connections it desperately needs to make information stick. Take off those handcuffs, and something remarkable happens. Languages stop being this impossible mountain and become this fascinating puzzle that clicks together naturally. Over the next 45 minutes, you're going to discover the exact system that took Gabriel from struggling through Spanish to performing operas in Russian. You'll learn why most people forget 90% of what they study within days and how to flip that completely. You'll understand why children learn languages effortlessly while adults struggle and how to steal their strategy. And you'll walk away with a precise roadmap to fluency in any language you choose without spending thousands on classes or moving to another country. This is about becoming fluent forever, not temporarily memorizing phrases for a trip, not barely passing a test, actually thinking, dreaming, and living in another language and never forgetting it. Let's unlock how this actually works. Most people start learning a language completely backwards. They open a textbook to chapter 1 and immediately see lists of vocabulary words with English translations beside them. Gato means cat. Perro means dog. Seems logical, right? Learn the words, string them together, suddenly you speak Spanish. Except that's not what happens. What actually happens is your brain creates an incredibly slow, clunky system where you constantly translate back and forth. Someone says gato, your brain thinks, what's the English word for that? Cat. Then you respond in English, translate it back to Spanish in your head, then say it. By that point, the conversation has moved on and you're exhausted. This is why people study languages for years, but freeze up the moment a native speaker talks to them. Their brain is running translation software that's too slow for real conversation. Gabriel discovered this problem when he started learning Italian for opera performances. He'd spent months memorizing Italian-English vocabulary lists. Then he landed in Italy and couldn't understand anything. People spoke too fast, his brain couldn't translate quickly enough, he was drowning. That's when he stumbled on research about bilingual kids that completely changed his approach. When a bilingual kid sees a cat, they don't think cat and then translate it to gato. They just think gato. The word is directly connected to the image, the concept, the memory of petting that cat. There's no translation layers slowing everything down. Their brain stores language the same way it stores memories, through direct connections to experiences. So Gabriel tried something radical. He stopped translating entirely. Instead of flashcards that said gato equals cat, he made flashcards with the Italian word and a picture of a cat. Just the image, no English anywhere. When his brain saw gato, it had to connect directly to the image of a cat, not to the English word. At first, this felt wrong. His brain protested. It wanted the security of English translation, but he forced himself to stick with it. Something incredible happened. Within weeks, words stopped feeling like translations. They felt like thoughts. When he saw a dog, his brain didn't think dog, perro. It just thought perro. The word became automatic, instant, natural. He could think in Italian instead of translating from English. And for the first time, actual Italian speakers could understand him in normal conversations because his brain wasn't lagging 3 seconds behind trying to translate everything. This was the first key. Your brain needs to think in the language, not about the language. And the only way to get there is by removing English entirely from the learning process. Connect words directly to images, sounds, experiences, anything except English translation. When you do this, your brain treats the new language like a native language, instead of a complicated code to decrypt. But Gabriel immediately hit another massive problem. He'd try to say Italian words, and Italian speakers would stare at him confused. He thought he was pronouncing things correctly. He wasn't. His brain was hearing Italian sounds, filtering him through English sounds, and producing something that sounded nothing like Italian. It's like when English speakers try to pronounce croissant, but it comes out sounding like croissant instead of the French croissant. Your brain literally cannot hear sounds it wasn't trained to hear as a child. Here's something wild. Babies can hear every sound in every human language. Japanese babies can hear the difference between R and L sounds perfectly, even though adult Japanese speakers famously struggle with this distinction. Russian babies can hear subtle vowel differences that adult English speakers cannot. But between ages 6 months and 1 year, babies' brains get pruned. They lose the ability to hear sounds that don't exist in their native language. The sounds disappear from their perception entirely. This is why adults struggle so much with pronunciation. You're not lazy or talented. Your brain literally cannot hear the sounds you're trying to make. You say a French word, a French person corrects you, you repeat it exactly the same way because to your ears they sound identical. You're not being stubborn. Your ears genuinely cannot detect the difference. Gabriel realized if he couldn't hear the sounds correctly, he'd never pronounce them correctly, and native speakers would never understand him. So he did something most language learners skip entirely. He trained his ears first, before learning a single word of meaning. He spent 2 weeks just learning to hear the sounds of his target language. He used something called minimal pair testing, listening to similar sounds over and over until his brain could distinguish them. Pa versus ba, ro versus lo, tu versus tu. Same sound to English ears, completely different sounds in other languages. This felt ridiculous at first. Why waste time on sounds when he could be learning vocabulary? But once he trained his ears, magic happened. Suddenly, he could hear what native speakers were actually saying. When they corrected his pronunciation, he could hear the difference. His accent improved dramatically, and here's the kicker. His listening comprehension exploded. He could understand native speakers at normal speed because his ears weren't fighting to decode unfamiliar sounds anymore. This was the second key. Master pronunciation before anything else, not after. Because if you build vocabulary and grammar on top of wrong sounds, you're building a house on a broken foundation. Every word you learn with bad pronunciation is a word you'll have to relearn later. But if you nail the sounds first, every word you learn afterward automatically sounds correct. You save hundreds of hours of frustration. Now Gabriel could hear languages correctly and pronounce them properly, but he still had to actually learn words, thousands of them. And this is where most people completely fall apart. They create flashcards, study diligently, then forget everything within days. They feel like their memory is broken. It's not. They're just using flashcards wrong. Here's what actually happens in your brain when you try to memorize something. Your brain asks, is this important? Should I save this? If the answer is no, that memory gets deleted within hours. Your brain is ruthlessly efficient. It refuses to waste energy storing information you might never need. So when you study a vocabulary flashcard that says maison equals house, your brain looks at that and sees no emotional connection, no visual memory, no personal significance, just abstract symbols. Not important, delete. But what if instead of maison equals house, your flashcard showed the French word maison with a photo of your childhood home? Suddenly, your brain connects that word to memories, emotions, nostalgia. Important. Save. This is how Gabriel cracked the memory problem. He made every single flashcard personal. He didn't use generic stock photos. He searched Google Images for pictures that triggered personal memories and connections. Learning the French word for beach, he used a photo of a beach that looked like one from his favorite vacation. Learning angry, he found an image of someone whose facial expression reminded him of his own anger. Learning coffee, picture of his favorite cafe. Every word connected to something personally meaningful. His brain stopped seeing abstract vocabulary and started seeing memories with language attached. This created something called elaborative encoding, the most powerful memory technique neuroscience has discovered. When you connect new information to existing memories, your brain creates multiple neural pathways to that information. If one pathway fades, 10 others remain. The word becomes almost impossible to forget because it's woven into the fabric of your personal history. But Gabriel took this further. He discovered spacing is just as important as connection. Your brain has a forgetting curve. Information fades predictably over time unless you review it at specific intervals. Review too soon, you waste time studying things you haven't forgotten. Review too late, you've already forgotten and have to relearn from scratch. But review at the perfect moment, right before you're about to forget. You strengthen the memory dramatically. There's software called spaced repetition systems that calculates these perfect intervals automatically. You study a flashcard, the system asks, how hard was that? If easy, it shows you that card in 4 days. If hard, tomorrow. The system tracks thousands of cards individually, showing you each one at the exact moment you're about to forget it. This turns cramming, the worst way to remember anything, into spaced repetition, the best way to remember anything. Gabriel combined these techniques, personal images with no translation, reviewed through spaced repetition. The results shocked him. He was learning 50 to 100 new words per day and actually remembering them weeks later. Previous methods, he might learn 20 words and forget 15 by next week. This system, he'd learn 100 and remember 95. The difference wasn't subtle. It was the difference between drowning in vocabulary and actually becoming fluent. This was the third key. Make memories memorable through personal connections, then review them right before you forget. Stop cramming, stop reviewing randomly. Let the system calculate perfect intervals. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. Feed it patterns it can recognize. Personal connections, reviewed at optimal intervals, and suddenly you have a photographic memory for vocabulary. So now Gabriel could hear languages correctly, pronounce them accurately, and remember vocabulary efficiently. But languages aren't just collections of words, they're systems with grammar rules that often make zero sense to English speakers. Why is a table feminine in French, but masculine in German? Why does Russian have 6 different cases? Why does Japanese structure sentences backward from English? Grammar is where most people's brains completely shut down. Traditional approaches teach grammar through rules and tables. Memorize these verb conjugations. Study these declension charts. Your brain sees a wall of information, panics, and retains maybe 10%. Gabriel tried this and hit a wall immediately. His brain couldn't hold abstract rules. They had no hooks, no connections, nowhere to stick. Then he realized something. Children don't learn grammar through rules, they learn through examples. A toddler never studies conjugation tables. They hear, I go to the store 100 times, then naturally say, I go instead of I goes. They hear, he goes to the store, and their brain absorbs the pattern without conscious rule learning. Gabriel started teaching his brain grammar the same way. Instead of memorizing rules, he collected example sentences. Instead of studying conjugation charts, he saw the patterns in context dozens of times until they became automatic. He'd find a grammar pattern he needed, say Italian past tense. Instead of memorizing the rule, he'd find 10 example sentences using that pattern. Ieri ho mangiato pizza. Yesterday I ate pizza. Ho parlato con Maria. I spoke with Maria. 10 different examples showing the same pattern. He'd make flashcards from these sentences with pictures showing the action. His brain started recognizing the pattern naturally. Oh, past tense uses o plus past participle. Got it. Except he never consciously thought about the rule, his brain just knew it from seeing the pattern repeatedly. For bizarre grammar, like why tables are feminine, he used mnemonics. He'd imagine all masculine nouns exploding, feminine nouns catching fire, neuter nouns shattering like glass. Ridiculous images that made his brain remember arbitrary information. When he saw table in German, his brain would flash to an image of a table exploding, telling him it's masculine. Absurd, but effective. This approach transformed grammar from this terrifying obstacle into pattern recognition. His brain stopped trying to remember rules and started recognizing patterns automatically, the same way native speakers do. He wasn't thinking about grammar while speaking, he was speaking naturally because the patterns were embedded through repetition, not memorization. This was the fourth key. Learn grammar through examples and patterns, not rules and charts. Your brain is terrible at remembering abstract rules, but incredible at recognizing patterns. Feed it patterns in context, and grammar stops being math class and starts being intuitive. Now Gabriel had all the pieces: correct sounds, efficient vocabulary learning, intuitive grammar. But he still couldn't understand native speakers. They talked way too fast. TV shows and movies were incomprehensible. He could read at a decent level, but listening felt impossible. This is the brutal wall where most language learners quit. They study for months, think they're making progress, then try to watch a movie and understand maybe 20%. The gap between classroom learning and real-world comprehension feels impossibly wide. The problem? He'd been learning language at textbook speed, carefully enunciated, slow, clear. But real people don't talk like textbooks. They mumble, they slur words together, they use slang, they speak at lightning speed. His brain needed training at real-world speed, not classroom speed. So he did something uncomfortable. He started watching TV shows in his target language with no subtitles. At first, this was torture. He'd watch a 20-minute show and understand maybe 10 words, but he kept going. Every day, one show. He'd read Wikipedia summaries beforehand so he knew the plot, which gave him context clues. He picked shows with simple dialogue, procedurals, not rapid-fire comedies, and slowly, painfully, his brain adapted. Here's what happens when you immerse in native speed content. Your brain stops trying to translate every word and starts understanding meaning through context. You hear a character say something angry in an angry scene. You may not know every word, but you understand they're angry. You watch a dinner scene, you start recognizing food words through context. Your brain fills in gaps, and the more you watch, the more gaps fill in until one day you realize you're understanding entire conversations without conscious effort. Gabriel combined this with active practice. He found language exchange partners online, native speakers learning English who wanted to practice with native English speakers learning their language. They'd video chat,
Half the time in English for them, half in the target language for him. Terrifying at first. He'd stumble, mess up, feel embarrassed, but mistake by mistake, his speaking fluency caught up to his vocabulary knowledge. The magic moment came about 4 months into intensive study. He was watching a Russian TV show and suddenly realized he'd forgotten to read the Wikipedia summary first. He'd been following the plot without any preparation. His brain had started thinking in Russian. The language had stopped being translation puzzles and become actual communication. That's the moment fluency happens, when you stop noticing you're using another language and you're just using it. This was the 5th key. Immerse in real-world content at native speed and practice speaking with real humans. Your textbook knowledge means nothing until you force your brain to process language at actual human speeds. It's uncomfortable, it's frustrating, it's necessary. Without it, you'll forever be trapped in the gap between studying language and actually speaking it. At this point, Gabriel had built fluency from scratch in Russian in about 10 months, then Italian in 6, then French in 5. Each language got faster because his system improved. But he discovered something fascinating about moving beyond basic fluency into advanced mastery. There's a massive difference between ordering coffee and discussing philosophy, between understanding a kids' show and understanding complex movies, between basic vocabulary and truly thinking like a native speaker. The gap between intermediate and advanced is massive, and most learners get stuck there forever. They reach a level where they can survive in the language, then plateau. Gabriel avoided this by constantly pushing into uncomfortable territory. Once TV shows felt comfortable, he moved to movies. Once movies felt easy, he moved to novels. Once novels clicked, he moved to academic papers and news articles. Each level pushed his comprehension higher. For vocabulary expansion beyond basics, he stopped using frequency lists and started building thematic vocabulary around his actual interests. Loved cooking? He learned all the cooking vocabulary in his target language. Interested in history? He'd read historical texts. This kept learning engaging while building deep vocabulary banks in topics that mattered to him personally. He also made a crucial shift. He started using monolingual dictionaries. Instead of French-English dictionaries, he used French-French dictionaries. This forced his brain to define words using his target language, not translation. When he looked up a French word and read its definition in French, that connection reinforced both the word and its definition simultaneously. His French vocabulary started reinforcing itself rather than constantly leaning on English as a crutch. Reading novels became a powerful advanced tool. He started with Harry Potter, familiar story, simpler language, engaging enough to push through difficult sections. The first few chapters were brutal, looking up words constantly, struggling through sentences, but somewhere around chapter 3, something shifted. The story pulled him forward. He started inferring word meanings from context instead of looking everything up. His brain adapted to reading in another language. By the end of the book, he'd absorbed 300 to 500 new words naturally through context, plus he'd reinforced thousands of words he already knew.
For speaking practice at advanced levels, he used a technique called the game of taboo, having entire conversations with native speakers where English was completely forbidden. If he didn't know a word, he had to describe it in his target language. This forced him to think creatively in the language instead of falling back on translation. His brain stopped treating the new language as a translation puzzle and started treating it as a complete communication system. This was the 6th key. Push constantly into uncomfortable territory. When something feels comfortable, you've stopped learning. Read material just above your current level. Watch shows slightly too hard. Have conversations that make you struggle for words. That discomfort is growth. Stay in it.
That's where intermediate learners become advanced speakers. All of these pieces created a complete system. Start with sounds, train your ears before anything else. Build vocabulary through personal image flashcards reviewed via spaced repetition. You build basic grammar through example sentences, not rules. You immerse in native speed content even when it's painful. You practice speaking with real humans despite embarrassment. You keep pushing into harder material forever. This system took Gabriel from zero Russian to performing Russian operas in under a year, from zero Korean to conversational fluency in 8 months. Languages that took others decades took him months. But here's what's wild. This isn't about being talented. Gabriel failed at language learning using traditional methods just like everyone else. He struggled through high school Spanish and remembered almost nothing. The difference wasn't talent. It was method. He aligned his learning with how memory actually works instead of fighting against it. He worked with his brain instead of against it, and that made all the difference. The real secret of the entire system comes down to this. Your brain wants to learn languages. It's designed for it. Every human child learns whatever language surrounds them effortlessly. That ability doesn't disappear in adulthood. It just gets buried under bad methods. Translation buries it. Boring grammar drills bury it. Abstract vocabulary lists bury it. Remove those obstacles and your brain's natural language learning ability emerges. Think about how children learn. They don't use dictionaries. They connect words directly to objects and experiences. They don't study grammar rules. They hear patterns repeatedly until patterns become automatic. They don't practice pronunciation drills. They mimic sounds they hear until they match. And they're not afraid to make mistakes because mistakes are how brains learn. This entire system is just adult learning that mimics childhood learning. Direct connections, pattern recognition, sound mimicry, and fearless practice. The results speak for themselves. People using this system report getting to conversational fluency in 4 to 6 months with just 30 minutes of daily practice. Not decades, months. They're not geniuses. They're regular people who finally have a method that works with their brain instead of against it. The system removes the obstacles that make traditional language learning feel impossible and replaces them with techniques that make learning feel natural. Here's what this looks like in practical terms. You choose a language. You spend 2 weeks training your ears to hear that language's sounds using minimal pair testing. You learn the top 600 most common words through personal image flashcards reviewed via spaced repetition. You build basic grammar through example sentences, not rules. You start watching TV shows in your target language. You find language exchange partners online. 30 minutes a day, every day. Within months, you're having basic conversations. Within 6 months, you're functionally fluent. Within a year, you're reading novels. That timeline sounds impossible if you've been studying languages the traditional way for years with minimal results. But it's not about time. It's about method. An hour studying with bad methods teaches you almost nothing. 30 minutes studying with good methods creates permanent changes in your brain. It's not about working harder. It's about working smarter. And smarter means working with your brain's natural capabilities instead of fighting them. This changes what's possible. Want to work internationally? Learn the language in 6 months. Want to connect with your heritage? Your ancestors' language is 6 months away. Want to understand foreign films, read untranslated literature, travel with confidence? All 6 months away. Languages stop being this impossible mountain you climb for decades and become this achievable skill you build in months. That shift in perspective transforms everything. But here's the catch. This requires consistency. 30 minutes daily beats 3 hours on Saturday. Your brain needs regular exposure to strengthen neural pathways. Skip days, and pathways weaken. Stay consistent, and pathways become superhighways. Most people fail not because the method doesn't work, but because they break consistency. They start strong, skip a few days, feel guilty, Quit entirely. The language learners who succeed are the ones who show up daily, even when they don't feel motivated, even when progress feels slow, even when it's boring. That's the final key: consistency over intensity. Your brain changes through repetition over time, not through occasional bursts of effort. 30 minutes every single day for 6 months will make you fluent. 3 hours once a week for 6 months will teach you almost nothing. Brains need regular exposure to rewire. Give them that exposure, and learning becomes inevitable. Skip days, and learning becomes impossible. So that's the complete system. Train your ears first. Use images instead of translation. Make every word personal. Review through spaced repetition. Learn grammar through patterns, not rules. Immerse in native speed content even when it's painful. Practice speaking with real humans despite embarrassment. Keep pushing into harder material forever. This system took Gabriel from zero Russian to performing Russian operas in under a year, from zero Korean to conversational fluency in 8 months. Languages that took others decades took him months. But here's what's wild. This isn't about being talented.
You now understand why traditional language learning fails. Translation creates slowness, boring drills create forgetting, bad pronunciation creates comprehension gaps, and abstract rules create confusion. But more importantly, you understand how to fix every single one of those problems. Direct connections instead of translation, personal images instead of word lists, ear training before vocabulary, pattern recognition instead of rule memorization, real immersion instead of textbook dialogue, consistent practice instead of occasional studying. The real transformation happens when you stop seeing languages as impossible mountains and start seeing them as solvable puzzles. Each word is just a connection between sound and meaning. Each grammar pattern is just repetition until recognition. Each conversation is just practice, making your mouth match your thoughts. Break fluency down into these small pieces, and suddenly it's not impossible. It's just a series of achievable steps done consistently over months. This is your moment. Maybe you've tried learning languages before and felt like you failed. You didn't fail. The method failed you. Maybe you've been telling yourself you're not good at languages. You're wrong. Your brain is a language learning machine that's been handicapped by bad techniques. Maybe you've been putting off learning because it seems too hard. It's not hard. It's just been taught wrong. Pick your language. Find your resources. Train your ears first. Build your vocabulary through personal connections. Learn patterns through examples. Immerse in real content. Practice speaking despite fear. Stay consistent for 6 months. That's it. That's the entire roadmap. It's not magic. It's not talent. It's just a method that works with your brain instead of against it. 6 months from now, you could be having conversations in a language you don't speak today, reading books you can't read today, watching shows you can't understand today, connecting with people you can't talk to today. That future is 6 months of consistency away, not decades, not years, 6 months. The question isn't whether you can do it. The question is whether you'll start. Your brain is ready. The method is proven. The only thing missing is your decision to begin. Fluent forever isn't a dream. It's a choice. Choose it. Your future multilingual self is waiting.